Justice a while ago in one of the meetings at the Chapel Square. I learned about restorative justice and the idea I'd heard about before, some of the principles I didn't know, the person who was important in Dubuque and focused on it, and it was really helpful to me. And analogously, what I want to do is talk about personal communicating racial equity rather than what I prefer to do, is put you in situations where you could actually experience this and, to create some opportunities for you to talk about it and for us to really interact, have some cases and applications and that kind of thing that could maybe produce some actual learning. So what I am focusing on is implicit bias, really, or at least that's the way we talk about it, I think, in a lot of vocabulary. Go to the next slide. And for me, this event is one of the most poignant examples of implicit bias, recent examples in the culture. And there's a lot to say about this, all right? So more than one culture was involved in, persons from more than one culture were involved in the event. It wasn't simply a black-white sort of deal. But when a behavioral therapist who happens to be a large black man is lying down in his back in the streets of Miami, trying to talk down an autistic patient of his who has a toy truck in his hand, and 3 shots are fired by a SWAT team member who's apparently gone through the training that you ought to go through in Miami, Florida to get on the SWAT team. And when the man shot, Charles Kennedy, asked the guy why he shot him, the guy said, "I don't know." And then, of course, there's been subsequent comments that came out from the police union and so on. I mean, the way I process that is saying, what a manifestation of the presence of implicit bias in this culture. One, it's just an egregiously prominent element. Black men are fearful. You've got to fear them. Go ahead to the next one. And so next, I remember what I started this a long time ago with this next one too, the quotation from Martin Luther King, which links together the beginning in fear that he connects to lack of understanding, and then that he suggests could be ameliorated by learning to do what he calls properly communicating. Next one. And then a lot of people say this, go ahead to the next one, including the president after some of these events that have occurred. And all of us kind of resonate with this comment. What we need to do is just kind of treat everybody as humans, right? I mean, not denying their cultural distinctiveness and identity, not doing that, but recognizing that there's commonalities that we can work with. And many of us feel good about that. And yet when it comes down to, okay, so exactly what do you do to do this? Treat everybody as a human being. There's a variety of different responses to that. Well, what I've developed over a number of years of thinking about interpersonal communication is one approach to talk about how to do that. And so that's what this brief model talks about. And so if you'll go to the next slide. So it's got 9 steps, and I've already talked to you about this step, and so I put it all on at once. Step 1 is to get conscious about what you do as a communicator, what all of us do all the time, which is take in and give out impressions, understandings, information, whatever you want to call it. The taking in includes your expectations, what you're doing verbally, what you're doing non-verbally. The giving out includes what topic you choose to talk about, how much you talk about yourself, what you do verbally and non-verbally. Remember we talked about that with the little pink notebooks a while ago. So that's one. Inventory this and begin to manage what you do as a communicator. We're talking about communicating properly, right? We're talking about how to operationalize this grand notion of treating everybody as a human. Next one. Then another step that I think is important is to recognize we're not just talking about some kind of superficial overlay or theoretical rationale, but there's some neurobiological evidence that human brains process information in more than one way. The whole left brain, right brain thing is a little bit in question, whether it's hemispheric diversity and hemispheric characteristics or whether it's distributed throughout both hemispheres. But there's a couple ways that neurobiologists agree that we process information. And one is analytic and objective and literal and grouping. And those are extremely important, extremely powerful for a lot of things. And the other is holistic, engaged, figurative, and a way that grasps uniqueness. And I want to say just a word about that last one because it's going to be particularly important. One of the definitions of art, and I think I might have said this before, as many of you have probably heard, is that a piece of art is unique, and there's only one Michelangelo's David. Only one of those. Only one Guernica, right? And that's what an artist has a particular ability to make, craft, create. And we have the ability to grasp. Well, there's only one mom, too. Okay? And only one dad. And we have that ability, you know the studies of facial recognition, we have that ability to grasp uniqueness. And we have the ability to group people. That's a group of people I don't want to interact with. That's a group of people I do. Both of those are useful. We've got a couple ways of understanding the next one. Ian McGilchrist is one neurobiologist who called these in the next one impersonal and personal. And of course this one is impersonal, and that's just a little photograph to give you an image of that. And this one is personal. That's what he says. Our brains have two ways of processing information. One could be called impersonal and one could be called personal. So that's the labels he gives them, not left brain, right brain, but impersonal and personal. Okay, go ahead. Next one. So we come to step 3. And this is an ethical step. This involves making a commitment. And it is to helping make your communication as personal as possible. This does not mean wearing your heart in your sleeve, prying into someone else's private life. It also does not mean the old advice, you got to keep your distance, maintain your objectivity in order for you to function effectively. Next one. But to follow the advice that's given in a lot of literature to physicians, educators, and business people that says you don't want, management by wandering around, the open door policy, always consult before deciding, all those things you've heard about in the management books. They're about developing relationships in businesses, professional relationships, right? Not intimate ones, professional ones. Not keeping people at a distance. The Foundation for Personalized Medicine, that's not the right word for it, that's been meeting in Geneva since 2008, is a group of physicians who are committed not to evidence-based medicine, but person-based medicine, a real difference. And educators talk about this too. Next slide. All right, so step 4 then is, you got this, you're focusing on, you're taking out and giving in. You realize what you're capable of doing. You make a commitment to be as personal as possible. What do you begin to do? Well, you take in and give out 4 features that characterize us as human beings, as persons. Now, I'm not going to say this is a universal philosophical anthropology. There's other responses to the question, what makes a person? But these are 4 that cover a fair amount of the universe. We make choices all the time. We engage emotionally, spiritually, with our personalities, so those unmeasurable parts of us that lots of different people label in different ways. That's part of who we are. We are reflective. A lot of animals, sentient animals, have the ability to be aware. Humans appear to be the only ones who can be aware of our awareness. Aware of our awareness. Have second thoughts. Critique our processes and so on. Be reflective. And 4th, we can be mindful. And there's a lot of work going on about the benefits of mindfulness. And when translated to communication, mindfulness really means being present. Being present to the other person. These are 4 elements that can capture a lot of what it means for each of us to be a person, a human being. Okay, well, you can see where this is going, right? Remember where we were, communicating as personally as possible. So, go to the next slide. What are some examples of this? And I use this slide to indicate that I'm not talking about esoteric, arcane stuff. So here's an example of a couple of statements, not nonverbal stuff, but statements that might relate to choices. You might ask, this is the taking in part, you might ask, what is the most important point for you? And you can think about the variations that would inquire about choices. You might say, you know, my main priority is the budget. My main priority is keeping this group small enough so it works well together. You see, we're not talking about gut dumps, we're not talking about, as I said, wearing your heart on your sleeve. Talking about your own choices, inquiring about the other's choices next. Emotion, spirit, personality, if you just take affect, emotion. How do you feel about the way the group's going? That's a way to take in a second feature that makes us persons, to take that in. To give it out, I'm worried that she's too distracted. This isn't the time to go talk to her now. I mean, this is not rocket science. Third one, reflections. Do you have any second thoughts about this? I know a group that does a great deal, getting conversations around pro-life, pro-choice, immigration side and so on, by integrating this kind of a question into the dialogues that they have. Would you talk about any second thoughts that you have about your own position? So that's a way to take in reflection, a way to give them out. I used to believe this, I really did, and now I really see it this way. When it's appropriate, you might say that. And fourth, mindfulness or presence. What can you tell by paying attention to somebody? It looks like you'd really rather not do this kind of thing. I'm here. I'm staying here till we work this through. I'll stay here till we're finished. Okay. So the idea of this is it's not, you know, this is straightforward. Not easy, but simple. Step 5 then. 1 is take in and give out. 2, what our brain does. 3, commitment to, as personal as possible. 4, taking in and giving out those 4 elements. 5, help uniquenesses meet. Create the situation in your communicating. Remember, we're talking about dyadic, small group communication particularly. This is not a solution for systemic racism by itself. All right? It's not what we're talking about. Help uniquenesses meet. Take in relevant aspects of the other's uniqueness, of the other's choices, and so on. Right? And you know what the second is going to be. Go ahead. Give out relevant aspects of your own uniqueness. Next one. And the next one, when uniquenesses meet, then your communicating is as personal as possible. Of course, what the as possible is in there is that you're not talking about buddy-buddy and friend and agreement and intimacy and sex and all that with everybody, obviously. As personal as possible. And it's possible in every situation. I know one person in this room who has this in his head because I've been pounding on him for a while. And he finds all kinds of different places where that's what he works toward. I won't embarrass him right now. Excuse me, just go back again. I just thought what Prince Henry does when he goes to Africa, you know, I think uniqueness is meeting. This really seems to connect. Okay, next one. So here's where now I haven't been talking about cultural difference yet. I mean, I haven't been talking about inclusiveness or diversity and so on. Here's the bridge. The context for this happening in the U.S. today, the context for trying to do what Martin Luther King says, communicate properly so that you understand, so that you don't fear. The context for that, it seems to me, is dominantly whiteness, white privilege, and the problems that go along with that. Now, what the next one? This is W.E.B. Du Bois, who said in 1903 that this was the problem in the 20th century, and it's still there. This is my opinion, all right? That race is pervasive and ubiquitous as a problem, and black-white next is the most difficult part of it. And that we need equity, not just equality, because there has been the opposite of equity, inequities for so many years, that if we do equality, everybody goes up the same, and it's all still inequitable. Okay, so that's the context. Next one. So, there's 3 more steps, 7, 8, and 9. 7 is practice, curiosity. And the first step is to be curious about your own cultural identity. We need you to reflect on what are your cultural identifiers, and where are they in level of importance? You know, my age, my maleness, my whiteness are 3 things that are really important to me. For other people, it could be other pieces of cultural identity. But you've got to start with reflection, cultural reflection. Curiosity begins at home. Next one. And then being genuinely curious about others. the reason for curiousness, and I got this from Andre Lascires when working with him, and many of you know him. He emphasized the importance of curiosity, and it just struck me one day, if you really can, I think I've got a picture of this here. If you can really get in a curious mindset, you're not going to be defensive. If you're just really saying, wow, something, what? You know, it can just orient you to a situation where there's a difficult difference, a difficult cultural difference, in a way that lowers the intensity of it. And you just say, I wonder what's going on. I wonder if I can learn from this. So curiosity is really critical. Next step is cultural humility. And by humility, I mean holding your cultural commitments lightly rather than with white knuckles. You don't have to, next one, you don't have to give up any of your cultural commitments. I mean, let's say you believe as a Christian that homosexual relationships are really against the will of God. Let's just say that's a belief for you. That's important. That's part of your identity, cultural identity as part as a Christian. That goes along with it. You do not have to give that up. You need to recognize a lot of people believe homosexuality is not a choice, not a lifestyle, but something inborn, and there's physicians believe that, and there's a lot of medical evidence about that, and that is how some people believe. You need to recognize some things beyond your own point of view, but you don't have to give up that point of view. You need to move from ethnocentrism to cosmopolitanism, to my world is the only world centered in your own ethnos, right? Picture. And of course, one of the persons who had a lot of humility of various kinds is pictured there. And the final step is to practice what I call platinum empathy. And you're all familiar with empathy, and it's an extremely important idea. Treat others as you'd like to be treated. Sometimes that's linked with the golden rule. And getting really good here with nonverbal with the gestures, right? Platinum empathy, some people make a big deal out of it, and it's, in my experience, it's been really important. Treat others as they would like to be treated, not just as you think they might. You would like it. So this requires spending time with, asking questions of, listening for, being present to others, cultural others, practicing platinum empathy. Okay, so you put them all together, next, and that's what they look like. Now each of these, again, is none of them is rocket science, and each of them can be very difficult to do. Become aware of what you take in, how your face looks when you're listening. Okay, experience I had early on in being a teacher. I was talking to a young woman after class out in the hall outside my office, and I thought I was just really listening to her effectively. And she stopped what she was saying and said, "Back off!" And I thought, whoa. In fact, it happened to be an African-American woman. I thought I was just, and she thought I was looming over her. Just becoming aware of how I take in information, that can be difficult. Becoming aware of how I give out information, my word choices, my topic choice, that can be difficult. You can say that about each of these 9 steps. They each require some effort. And they're all doable, right? Anderson? Yeah. Anderson and I are buddies about this. They're doable. They are doable. And this is a way, and I won't sell it as the only way, but it's a coherent way to do what King suggested we need to do. Begin communicating, he called it properly, as personal as possible. Is it appropriate all the time? Will you get very far sometimes? No, you won't. You won't. You'll get people who will just push right back. And there's always the next time. History isn't over yet. Right? You can keep at this. Okay, so here's the plug. This is